a new challenger is stepping onto the Souls-like battlefield. Wuchang Fallen Feathers is an action RPG that's set to drop on July 24, 2025. Developed by LiesOfP and published by 505 Games, this game is coming to PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox Series X and S. What's a big deal here is that Wuchang will be a day one title on Xbox and PC Game Pass, which is a huge strategic move. Players take on a role of Bai Wuchang, a female pirate warrior on a perilous journey through the war-torn, plague-ridden lands of Shu during the late Ming Dynasty. The game is built using the powerful Unreal Engine 5. Wuchang is entering a super competitive market, and it aims to stand out with its unique historical and mythological Chinese setting and some innovative mechanics. Early buzz suggests it's a strong entry, heavily inspired by From Software's Dark Souls trilogy, but with its own unique twists. Some have called it a visual feast and an ambitious, polished Souls-like. The Day 1 Game Pass launch is a massive deal. It removes the initial barrier to entry for millions of subscribers, dramatically boosting the potential player base, especially for a new IP from a lesser-known studio like LiesOfP. This widespread access could temper potential criticism. Even if the game gets mixed reviews, players on Game Pass are less likely to feel like they've wasted money, which encourages them to give it a shot regardless. Plus, a bigger launch day player count can kickstart more community discussions, guides, and content creation, potentially giving the game a longer shelf life, even if it doesn't become a mainstream smash hit. From the developer and publisher's perspective, this guarantees a certain level of engagement and revenue, which can help fund future projects or updates. Wuchang Fallen Feathers sticks closely to the traditional Souls-like formula, delivering tough, rewarding combat, maze-like environments, and familiar bonfire-style rest points. The game puts a heavy emphasis on learning enemy patterns and really rewards players who stay persistent and observant. Visually, it's stunning, dark, moody, and full of atmosphere. One standout difference from other Souls-likes is how it handles storytelling. Instead of cryptic cutscenes or vague item descriptions, Wuchang presents its narrative more directly, through brief dialogues, character interactions, and clearer item lore, making the world feel a bit more accessible without sacrificing mystery. What really sets Wuchang apart, though, are its unique gameplay systems: Feathering Disease, the Madness System, and Skyborn Might. Our main character, Bai Wuchang, suffers from a strange illness that usually drives people insane, but she seems to have some resistance. It's an intriguing concept, but according to some reviews, it doesn't play as big a role as you'd expect. In fact, it can be mostly ignored and feels a little underdeveloped, which makes it somewhat confusing in the grand scheme of the game. Then there's the Madness System, which is where things get a lot more interesting. Every time you die or kill a human, your madness bar increases. But taking down feathered beasts and monsters helps lower it. As madness grows, Wuchang's eyes start glowing neon red, and if you let it build up too much, you basically become a glass cannon, powerful but fragile. And here's where it gets wild. Sometimes when you die with high madness, a demonic doppelganger of yourself will spawn, guarding your lost currency. This clone might even be equipped with weapons you've never seen, and beating it becomes a whole challenge on its own. If you die repeatedly to a boss, this doppelganger won't show up at the boss arena, meaning you'll have to go die somewhere else to get it to reset. And finally, we have Skyborn Might, a special resource you build up through precise dodging and certain weapon combos. It powers up your abilities and magic, pushing you toward a more aggressive and reactive playstyle. It encourages players to stay engaged in combat and rewards timing and momentum, adding a nice layer of strategy to the usual Souls-like grind. All in all, Wuchang Fallen Feathers offers a familiar yet fresh take on the genre, with beautiful visuals, refined combat, and a few unique twists, some of which land better than others. It's definitely one to watch if you're a fan of games like Bloodborne or Sekiro, but craving something a bit different. There are 5 weapon classes: axes, greatswords, twin blades, one-handed swords, and spears. Combat is described as flashy and fun, exhilarating and fast-paced, and well-tuned and full of options. Dodging is a primary defensive tactic that rewards you with Skyborn Might. Parrying is weapon-specific and often less rewarding than dodging because it doesn't always stun enemies, creating a parry versus dodge conundrum. A common criticism is that bosses rarely stagger and are hard to interrupt, which makes it tough to pull off those flashy combos and often leads to getting juggled by boss attacks. Bosses are also incredibly aggressive and relentless. The game is praised for its flashy and fun combat that's full of options, yet critics point out that bosses rarely stagger and are hard to interrupt. This disconnect shows how the combat, while having high potential for dynamism, can be stifled in practice. The inability to stagger bosses directly impacts your ability to perform flashy combos. This means that while the potential for dynamic combat exists through the Skyborn Might system and diverse weapon skills, its practical application against bosses is often frustrating. This points to a fundamental conflict in the game's design philosophy. Your character is built for aggressive, combo-based play, but boss design doesn't always support this playstyle. This can lead to a gap between player expectation and gameplay reality, forcing players to rely more on precise dodging and pattern recognition rather than creative, sustained offense, which goes against the flashy description. The game features a robust skill tree that is abundant and unique, reminiscent of the sphere grid in Final Fantasy X. This is where you spend the game's currency, Red Mercury, to unlock nodes, power up Wuchang, and improve your weapon skills. You can res-pack your skill tree at any time, which offers significant flexibility for adapting your build to specific challenges. This system allows for diverse playstyles, from close-quarters brawlers to magic-focused builds. However, some of the terminology and management can be confusing and require more time to fully understand. The weapon-specific defensive mechanics and the ability to res-pack your skill tree at any time point to a design philosophy that encourages experimentation and adaptability, but potentially complicates the initial learning curve. Instead of one universal defensive mechanic like blocking or parrying, each weapon type has a unique defensive skill. This forces players to choose weapons not just for offense, but for their preferred defensive style. This is a significant departure from most Souls-likes. The skill tree is Path of Exile-esque, and with a free res pack, it's clear players are expected to experiment and change their builds on the fly. This is a quality-of-life feature that reduces the risk of bad builds common in other RPGs. These elements suggest that LiesOfP is pushing players to engage deeply with its systems and adapt their playstyle frequently. While this offers tons of depth and replayability for dedicated players, it might be overwhelming for newcomers or those who prefer to stick to a single build, adding to the complexity issue noted in reviews. The game actively discourages players who like to use one weapon and outfit and never change it.
Catch my breath. Have mercy.
Now let's talk about performance. Because as cool and good-looking as Wuchang Fallen Feathers is, it doesn't always run as smoothly as you'd hope. The game runs on Unreal Engine 5, which means you get some really beautiful visuals, detailed environments, cool lighting, flashy effects, but it also means the game can be pretty demanding on your system. If you're playing on PC, to run a game on low settings at 1080p, you'll need at least Windows 10, a processor like an i5 8400 or Ryzen 5 1600, around 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a graphics card like a GTX 1060 or RX 580. And yet, it takes up about 60 gigs of space, preferably on an SSD for better loading and performance. But if you want to play on higher settings or at better resolution, the requirements go up. You're looking at Windows 11, a stronger CPU like an i7 9700K or Ryzen 7 16GB of RAM, and a more powerful graphics card like an RTX 2070 or RX 5700 XT. Basically, mid to high-end gear is needed for the best experience. On PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, performance is a little more stable overall, and reviews are generally positive. Some PS5 players have reported frame drops and lag, especially when not using performance mode. It's not broken, but it's not flawless either. Now on PC, the story's a bit rougher. Some players, even those with decent rigs, are running into FPS drops, stuttering, and lag during busy scenes or boss fights. And if you're trying to play on a Steam Deck, you'll see blurry visuals, frequent dips below 30 FPS, and serious input lag. This game looks amazing, but it demands a lot from your system. Just hitting the minimum specs doesn't guarantee a smooth ride. You'll probably have to tweak settings, turn off a few features, and maybe even upgrade your hardware to get a really stable experience. If you're on console, you're in a better spot, but even there, don't expect it to be perfect, and if you're on PC with a mid-range setup, just be ready for some trial and error. Let's be real, Wuchang Fallen Feathers doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's clearly inspired by the giants of the Souls-like genre, and the comparisons are everywhere. First and most obviously, you can feel the From Software influence all over this game. The level design in particular is basically a love letter to the original Dark Souls, full of winding paths, secret shortcuts, and that classic interconnected world that loops back on itself in satisfying ways. Combat-wise, there are definite shades of Bloodborne here. It rewards dodging and aggressive timing, rather than just hiding behind a shield. And while it's not as parry-heavy as Sekiro, some tense encounters really do carry that same kind of high-stakes energy, though it's worth noting that parrying in Wuchang is tied to specific weapons, not something you can do with every build. A lot of people are comparing Wuchang to LiesOfP, and honestly, it makes sense. Some even call it the best Souls-like since LiesOfP dropped in 2023, but there are some differences. While LiesOfP leaned hard into its gothic, puppet-fueled style and brutal difficulty, Wuchang feels a bit more balanced. It's still challenging, but it's difficult in a fair way, not just punishing for the sake of it. Then there's Black Myth, another Unreal Engine 5 game that's been turning heads. Both games aim for stunning visuals, but early impressions suggest Black Myth may have the edge in terms of cleaner combat flow and more varied boss fights. On the flip side, Wuchang leans more into exploration and level design than pure spectacle. The skill tree and character progression have even drawn some comparisons, especially in how they blend magic and melee builds. In short, Wuchang doesn't try to hide its inspirations, it embraces them, but it also brings enough of its own flavor to the table to stand out, especially if you love deep exploration, stylish combat, and a world packed with dark atmosphere.